Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Speaker Stories. Today, my guest is Dr. Howard Feldman, and Dr. Feldman has a talk coming up at RMSFCPM on April 25th. That's a Tuesday, starting at 11:30, and we're back at Wynkoop Brewing for the first time since before the pandemic. Dr. Feldman's talk is the sediment budget for levee-dominated deep-water Danube fan in the Black Sea. Howard has over 30 years experience working on petroleum geology in exploration, production, development, and research. He spent 26 years in a wide range of geoscience positions in Exxon Mobil, and before that spent 7 years in the petroleum section of the Kansas Geological Survey. He's currently an affiliate faculty at the Department of Geosciences at Colorado State University in Fort Collins, and a consultant at Feldman Geoscience. He has broad expertise applying the concepts of sequence stratigraphy to the facies interpretation and to reservoir architecture at a wide range of scales in all clastic settings. His current interests include deep water fan architecture and the importance of avulsions in producing predictable stratigraphic architecture and in fluvial architecture. Howard has published research articles on petroleum geology in the Journal of Sedimentary Research, AAPG Bulletin, and several book chapters, and has co-edited an SCPM book on sequence stratigraphy. Dr. Feldman, thanks for joining us today. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So we'll start off from the beginning. Where are you from? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Buffalo, New York. So I spent my formative years there. I got interested in geology there, just fossil collecting in the area. And so I'd go to road cuts and go to stream cuts and just started collecting fossils.
For those of us that aren't familiar with the area, what kind of fossils can you find? What ages were you?
The rocks that are outcropping in that area are all Devonian. So it's Devonian limestones and shales. So trilobites and crinoids, bits and pieces, brachiopods, that kind of thing.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. First of all, where did you go to school, and how did you get into geology as a career?
Sure. I was going to do my undergraduate in biology, and Jacques Cousteau was really big back then. So I was going to be a marine biologist. I was really inspired by him, and I went to college at State University of New York College at Oswego on the shores of Lake Ontario.
Okay.
And I took a few geology courses on the way, but I was mainly a biology major. And when I discovered that really there wasn't a huge amount of career options for marine biology, I decided to switch to geology. And then from there, went to Indiana University, got a PhD in paleontology, and gradually drifted from paleontology into stratigraphy and sedimentology, and then eventually ended up at Exxon.
Yeah. So how did that? How did you end up at Exxon? Was it kind of, did you get recruited through college, or was it what was?
No, after I got my PhD, I taught for a year, a non-tenure track position at Clemson University in South Carolina,
Okay.
and then I went to the Kansas Survey, and I was working on a lot of problems in taphonomy and looking at some Lagerstätten, which are sites that have incredible fossil preservation. And I realized that to understand the preservation of the fossils and how those facies were generated, I needed to get deeper into stratigraphy and sedimentology. And so that led me into stratigraphy and sedimentology. And I started realizing that a lot of the Lagerstätten that I was looking at were within incised valleys. I didn't even know what that was at the time. And so I started working on that, and that led to some work on tidal facies and estuarine facies. And so my interest gradually shifted more to the stratigraphic side of things. There were a lot of people working carbonates at the Kansas Survey, but nobody was really working the clastic section. Nobody was working the incised valleys. And so I took that up as a niche. And got a series of papers on that with colleagues, Al Archer mainly, and Bill Lanier at Emporia State. Al Archer was at K-State. And so the three of us just started attacking the plastic section, which really hadn't been looked at in about 30 or 40 years.
Okay.
And that led to the job at Exxon.
Okay. And so when you went to Exxon, were you part of kind of the research and development team, or where did you start?
Yeah, I joined the classic research group at EPR, Exxon Production Research. So it was just towards the end of when sequence strat was really exploding on the scene. Peter Vale had already left Exxon, but John Ben Wagner was still there and still active. And so I joined that team. I thought my plan at the time was to be there for 3 or 4 years and then go back to academia. And then 26 years later is when I'm actually getting back into research. But yeah, I had a great time there.
Yeah, what kind of stuff were you work? I mean, I've heard some stories from that group from the past, and what kind of things were you doing? Were you taking cool field trips to Middle East and those kind of?
Well, Middle East is more carbonates than clastics. I was purely clastics.
Okay,
So yeah, I got siloed pretty quickly into. I'd done some carbonate work at Kansas, but it was really hard to work both at EPR. You were either clastics or carbonates, and
Hmm,
basically the two groups didn't talk to each other.
really?
Yeah, I mean, I'm exaggerating for effect, but yeah, more or less. So, um, so I got it. I was at EPR doing research, and we EPR at that time worked like a consulting company to the rest of Exxon. So it's whenever there was an affiliate that had issues, we'd go down and it's like we're from EPR and we're here to help. And sometimes that was welcome and sometimes not so much. And
Imagine.
so, and I did a lot of teaching in the Book Cliffs, field work, field trips, some field work, and just traveling around and going to different offices and trying to solve stratigraphic problems. Usually, we'd be brought in after some team had drilled one or two unsuccessful wells in a field that was very productive, and they'd say, "Well, why?" and they didn't know, and so they'd bring us in,
Okay.
and so it was pretty challenging, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. At one point, my supervisor sent me to an office, and I had never done anything like this before. And she goes, "Well, you're going to this office, and you have to solve their problem." I go, "What's the problem?" She goes, "I don't know." And I said, "Well, how do I solve it?" And she goes, "I don't know that either. This is sink or swim time. You got to go there and figure it out."
Okay.
And so, and but I love that kind of pressure. I really did, and I had a great time. And I did a lot of those kinds of assignments.
So when you go into a situation like that, what kind of strategy, if you don't really know the problem or how to solve it, what's your initial tactic? What do you go in?
Well, I figured it out on the fly, but you start by just asking the local geologists who've been working the field, why am I here? What is it that the problem is? And they'd say, well, we drilled this well, we don't understand it, or we're getting water breakthrough, or the pressures aren't supported, or whatever it is. And so that's your kind of starting point. And then you look at the data that they have, and typically it's not enough. So they might have some core, and usually I was sent, because I'm a stratigrapher, I was sent to areas where stratigraphy was the key architectural problem or architectural issue. If it was mainly structure, they'd send someone else.
Yeah.
So I'd look at the core, I'd look at the well logs. If there was seismic, I'd look at seismic. If there was pressure data, almost never. I looked at pressure data. And then you start just building up a story. And usually it wasn't that complicated. Um, Classic kind of thing was distinguishing the high stand system tract deltas from the low stand system tract incised valleys, and showing that the incised valleys had the better reservoir facies. It's usually you start breaking it down into its components and solving each component one at a time, and then hope that by the time you get to the end, you've solved all or at least most of the production issues or the drilling issues, whatever it is, and that worked most of the time.
Okay. Okay. Did you get to use any of your paleontology experience when you were at Exxon, like any micropaleontology, or was that kind of
Nope.
just kind of
Nope.
that's fair?
I worked on brachiopods and crinoids and bryozoans. I know nothing about, I don't know anything more about micropaleontology than anybody else. And I guess the one place I did use it is I did actually read the biostrat reports to see what the uncertainties were in the age assignments,
Oh, okay.
and to look at biostrat reports from adjacent wells to see how similar they were, where the stratigraphic correlations are pretty clear. And unfortunately, a lot of my colleagues didn't take the time to do that. And so maybe that in that small way, my paleontology background came in. And so, but I never actually looked at a fossil the whole time I was at Exxon, except maybe there might be a little bit of a marine limestone someplace, and I could say, yep, that's marine because it has crinoids or something like that.
Okay.
But nothing more than that. I did get quite a bit into trace fossils, and I think that's because I had a lot of expertise in tidal facies and trace fossils. That's probably one of the reasons they hired me in the first place.
Okay. And do you have a favorite project that you can share with us from your time at Exxon? Anything stand out?
Sure. There's a couple. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff I can't talk about, obviously, but there's a couple. The favorite things were travel. So I got to travel, all over the world, do a lot of cool stuff. Uh, One of my favorite times was doing field work in northern Alberta. We'd get dropped off by helicopter
Mm.
and do field work all day in phenomenally beautiful territory and get picked up by the helicopter at the end of the day. So that was fun. I did a cool project in Wyoming where we actually hired an airplane and we flew the outcrop and got photo pans of this 80-kilometer long cliff and documented the transition from tidal up dip to deltaic to shore face as you go down dip, and that was amazing. We published that in JSR.
Wow.
And then just the travels, a lot of trips to Malaysia and some trips to Romania that were a lot of fun. It was just, I never turned down an opportunity to travel,
Yeah.
and I did a lot of traveling, and it was just a blast.
Yeah, that's excellent. Cool. So I like to ask about mentors and with the idea of like what makes a good mentor. So if you have any good mentors from your career that you want to shout out, or if you want to talk about what you think makes a good mentor. I mean, I think that's important for all of us to kind of think about as we.
Yeah, that it's so when I joined Exxon, when I joined EPR, the classics group had about 15, 16 people in it, the classics research group, and they hadn't hired anybody in 4 years. And it's kind of weird. They didn't really know what to do with me. And they didn't have an official mentoring program at that time.
Yeah.
That changed pretty quickly over the next few years. But so I, I hate to say it, but I didn't get a lot of mentoring. I kind of learned on the fly, and I was the first person hired. So I was hired in '95, and over the next 4 years, they hired probably 6 or 7 people into that group. And like I say, before me, they hadn't hired anybody in 4 years.
Wow.
So they were learning what to do with people that were brought into the program, and
Okay.
I was just kind of thrown into the deep end, and it was both exciting and scary at the same time. But I hate to say it, I didn't get a lot of mentoring when I
Yeah.
joined, and I did a lot of mentoring myself as my career advanced. And I think I understand what makes a good mentor is that you have to give people space to breathe, but also show them kind of the ropes of how the system works, the company culture, but the technology portion is a little bit easier. The company culture portion is a little bit harder to explain sometimes. what makes a successful career isn't necessarily the same as what makes a successful geologist,
Hmm.
and that can be tough to see sometimes.
Great. And then tell us about CSU. What do you do as an affiliate faculty? What's your role?
Sure. So affiliate means I don't get paid, but I help out when I can. I taught a field school in September. So I took a group of students, grad students and undergraduates, out to the Book Cliffs, one of my favorite field areas,
Huh.
and showed them the outcrops there, the stratigraphy, and the facies, looking a little bit at the Morrison Formation, but mainly looking at the classic Castlegate desert successions out there.
Okay.
And I've helped a little bit with teaching said strat this 2 semesters ago, and I'm just active in the department when I can be. And the part of it is I when I retired from Exxon, I didn't want to retire without some sort of academic post, because, for well, frankly, it's just you need it to do any kind of research that you're doing, because you need access to a library, and doing it on your own is just very expensive.
Hmm.
So, for example, when I taught the field school, I didn't take a salary. I just did it for free because it's fun and because I wanted to give back to the department. So I'm trying to contribute to the department when I can.
Very good. Very good. Okay. And when you're not running field trips, what do you like to do for fun? What do you do in your free time?
I like doing hiking, and I live in Fort Collins, where there's some awesome hiking around here, and so that's one of my fun things. Right now, I'm just deeply enmeshed in writing a new clastic facies textbook.
Okay.
And I hate to admit that's my fun time, but it is. And I'm trying to get my consulting business up and going. And so those things pretty much take up more than all of my time.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. And so for your talk coming up, and again, it's April 25th, so it's the last Tuesday in April, coming up in downtown Denver at the Wynkoop Brewing. Who's the target audience, and what do we expect to get out of your presentation?
Well, the target audience is anybody who's interested in deep water fans or in facies architecture and stratigraphic approaches. I This is a project I started at Exxon. Of course, when I left Exxon, I couldn't take any data with me,
Yeah.
so I've gone through the public databases, and I'm working with my colleagues at Infomere, which is like Woods Hole stratigraph or Woods Hole uh, Institute, but in France. It's a research organization on the coast, and they've very kindly shared a lot of data with me. And we're working on a publication, and this is about that. So it's the Danube fan. I think is one of the best analog deep water fans we have, because it's big enough to be interesting, but it's small enough that you can get seismic lines that go through the entire thing.
Hmm.
And there's a ton of seismic that is public right now. And
Okay.
so if you put all those pieces together, and the drop cores that Infomere collected, and bathymetry data, you can put together a pretty compelling story of what the architecture is from the last sea level low stand. So when the Black Sea itself is pretty interesting. When sea level went down, the Mediterranean was actually isolated from the Black Sea because the Bosporus isn't that deep. And so to a certain extent, base level in the Black Sea was a little bit independent from sea level, at least at low stand times. And so the fan was active when the shelf was exposed and the rivers went to the shelf edge, and they just dumped all their sediment into the fan. Then as the Mediterranean sea level went up, world sea level went up, eventually the Bosporus reconnected with the Black Sea.
Hmm.
Black Sea sea level went up, and the entire shelf, the entire northern shelf was submerged. And so now the Danube Delta is, I don't know, 120 kilometers from the shelf edge. And so the fan is completely abandoned.
Okay.
In fact, there's coccolith ooze that's being deposited in the distal part of the fan. So you've
Wow.
got one really nice package of sea level low stand, and the sequence boundary at the base of the fan is very clear. The abandonment surface at the top is very clear. And so then you can look at just one cycle of deposition. And there's enough drop cores and enough analogs of seismic facies from other systems that you can start to put together a sediment budget, which hasn't been done before. There's a lot of publications on the Danube fan, but no one's ever pulled it all together into one comprehensive analysis. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Wow. Okay. Great. Well, it seems analogous to some of the things that maybe we're doing in West Texas and New Mexico. So I'm looking forward to learning more about that. Again, April 25th. That's 11:30. We'll be in person. You can join online as well and watch it on Zoom. Find out more at rmssepm.org. And Dr. Feldman, thanks so much for being here today and talking with me. And we look forward to learning more on Tuesday the 25th.
I look forward to it.
All right. Thank you.